Have you ever stopped to think about what America's first government was actually like? I mean, before the Constitution we know today, before the president, there was a first draft, a kind of starter government. And let me tell you, its failure was so spectacular, so complete, that it's the very reason we have the system we do today. So let's get into it.
All right, so here's our roadmap. First, we're going to look at America's first rulebook, the Articles of Confederation. Then we'll see the massive cracks that started to form, leading to a breaking point that almost tore the new country apart. After that, we'll dive into the messy, difficult compromises that led to a whole new blueprint for the nation.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. The Articles of Confederation. You really have to think of this as the United States' first draft, written while the Revolutionary War was still raging. So, picture this. You've just broken free from a super powerful king. The last thing you want is another strong central government telling you what to do, right? The 13 states were definitely nervous about that. They needed to work together to win the war, sure, but they also really wanted to stay in charge of their own affairs. The result, which went into effect in 1777, was a government that was designed to be weak on purpose.
Now, to be fair, it wasn't a total disaster. This first government could do some pretty important things. It had the power to declare war, to make treaties with other countries, and to run a national post office. It even had one huge success, the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. This was a really big deal. It set up a fair way for new territories to become states, paving the way for the country to expand westward.
But, and this is a big but, here's the problem. For all its good intentions, the Articles created a government that was basically toothless. And those cracks in the foundation, they were about to become gaping holes.
I mean, just think about that for a second. What good is a government that can declare a war but has no way to actually pay for an army? What happens when you can pass laws but you can't make anybody follow them? It's a recipe for chaos.
And this is where that massive design flaw really becomes clear. The national government could ask the states for money, but it couldn't make them pay. There was no president to lead the country, no national court to settle fights between states, and no power to raise a national army. On top of that, every state was printing its own money. Can you imagine the mess? Trade was a nightmare. The country was really just 13 little nations pretending to be one big one.
A system this weak just couldn't hold. It was a ticking time bomb, and it was a violent uprising by its own citizens that finally proved to everyone that the government was broken beyond all repair. That event was Shays' Rebellion.
So here's what happened. In 1786, farmers in Massachusetts, many of them veterans who had just fought in the Revolution, were in big trouble. They were losing their farms because of crushing debt and high taxes. So, led by a guy named Daniel Shays, they grabbed their guns and started shutting down courthouses. And the national government? It was totally powerless to do anything. It had no army to send, no money to help. Eventually, a local militia put the rebellion down, but for the country's leaders, the message was terrifying.
This quote really says it all. Shays' Rebellion was the national alarm bell ringing off the hook. It was a huge warning sign that this whole American experiment was about to fail. What good was winning independence if the country was just going to collapse into chaos? Leaders knew they had to do something, and fast. And that's what led them to Philadelphia in 1787. Now, the original plan was just to fix the Articles, patch up the holes. But they pretty quickly realized that this thing was beyond repair. They needed to throw the whole thing out and start over. And that's when the real arguments began at what we now call the Constitutional Convention. The first huge fight was over a basic question. How do we represent the states in this new government? The big states, like Virginia, pushed for representation based on population. Makes sense, right? More people, more power. But the small states were terrified of being ignored, so they fired back with the New Jersey plan, demanding every state get an equal vote no matter its size. The whole convention was stuck, deadlocked. But then, a delegate named Roger Sherman from Connecticut came up with a brilliant idea that we now call the Great Compromise. He said, why not do both? Let's create a two-part Congress. In the Senate, every state gets 2 votes. That made the small states happy. And in the House of Representatives, representation is based on population, which made the large states happy. It was a genius move that saved the whole thing. So they solved one massive problem, but that solution brought up another, much darker one. If representation in the House was based on population, how should enslaved people be counted? Southern states wanted to count them to get more power in Congress. Northern states, of course, pushed back, pointing out that enslaved people were treated as property, not as citizens with rights. The agreement they came to was the horrible, infamous
3/5 compromise. It was this grim political math that said every 5 enslaved people would be counted as 3 people for purposes of representation. It was a dark, dehumanizing bargain that gave slave states way more power and tragically embedded the institution of slavery right into the nation's new foundation.
So, after a long, hot summer of intense debate and these major compromises, some of them brilliant, some of them deeply flawed, the delegates finally had a new blueprint for the American government, the Constitution.
In September of 1787, they put the final document to a vote. This new framework created a much, much stronger federal government, with a president, a national court system, and the power to actually tax people and raise an army. Most of the delegates signed it, but their job was far from finished.
Yeah, just because everyone in that room in Philadelphia signed off on it didn't make it the law of the land. Not even close. The document now had to go out to the 13 states for the ultimate test. The people themselves had to approve it.
And the bar was set pretty high. For this new Constitution to go into effect, it had to be ratified or approved by at least 9 of the 13 states. This kicked off a whole new year of intense, furious debates all across the country between those who supported it and those who were afraid it just created a new kind of king.
So when you boil it all down, the Constitution wasn't some perfect document sent down from the heavens. It was forged in fire. It was a bundle of messy, difficult, human compromises over power, representation, and freedom. And that leaves us with a really important question for our own time. Which of those foundational compromises are we still fighting about today?